Welcome in, Hokies fans, to this edition of the Tech Sideline Podcast. We record on Monday, September 12th, and the Hokies took care of business in Lane Stadium in Brent Pry's debut in front of Hokie Nation on Saturday, a 27-10 win over Boston College. On episode 254 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, we'll go back through Brent Pry's first head coaching victory. We'll look at the stifling defense that shut down the Eagles to under 200 total yards of offense and some big plays by the offense to get the win in Lane Stadium. All of that and much more coming up on episode 254 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, which starts right now. We welcome you into episode 254 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. However you are listening, whether that is on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or Stitcher, or if you are on our YouTube page, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you know when we go live every week of football season. Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company, one of the nation's leading community banks. First Bank and Trust is a nationally ranked community-focused bank with over 30 locations throughout Virginia and Northeast Tennessee, with an additional presence in North Carolina. They offer free checking with industry-leading mobile banking, financing solutions for personal, agriculture, business, commercial, and mortgage needs, and more. Visit www.firstbank.com to learn more. Going to be a fun podcast today, guys. We got the full crew on set across the way. David Cunningham, managing editor for TechSideline.com. Lead analyst and columnist Chris Coleman for Tech Sideline is to my right. In the fourth chair today, Katie Adams, and behind the scenes, founder and general manager Will Stewart, filling in as our best podcast producer in the land. And I'm your host, Jake Lyman. It was a fun night on Saturday in Lane Stadium, guys. Before we get into the game, how was your first game day weekend in Blacksburg of the season?
Excellent. Good tailgate. It's like as soon as I left my house, it wasn't raining. I parked and started walking. Then it started raining, and I put the poncho on. But as soon as I got to the tailgate, it quit raining. Yeah. And it didn't rain for the rest of the tailgate at all, and held off for most of the game too. So, and even when it did rain, it was one of those that like just enough to annoy you, but it wasn't going to drench you. So, I think we came out pretty well.
Yeah. I had my roommates and I, we had a good bunch of people in town, and everybody came over. We probably had 25 to 30 people at our house for that noon slate to watch the end of that great Alabama-Texas game. Yeah. I'm sure that everybody saw. Then I went to the press box and started working, but no, it was a fun game, and I think in general, everybody, the rain kind of held off, maybe a little bit of drizzle, and then at the end it kind of started to come down. But in general, a fun weekend. Virginia Tech played really well, especially defensively, got the win, and I think that kind of lifts a little bit of weight off of everybody's shoulders.
I had the same feeling yesterday. It's like I definitely feel like everybody, from Pry, the coaches, the players, the fan base. I'm much more relaxed now. I would say I think everybody wanted that first win, and then when you lose to ODU, obviously you wanted even more. Because like if Tech had lost to Boston College, yeah, you know you're going to beat Wofford, but you're sitting there wondering how long is it going to be till we get the first real win, right? So good to get that out of the way.
And I think that's the first thing I wanted to start with is big picture. You lose to Old Dominion. You've got an ACC game coming up. And then, yeah, you mentioned you have Wofford, but then it's that brutal stretch of the season with West Virginia, North Carolina, Miami, Pitt, NC State, all back to back to back to back. It felt like that was probably about as important of a win as it possibly could be, because things really could have spiraled if they fell to 0-2.
You got, just looking at the next two games after Wofford, West Virginia and Carolina back to back. They're two winnable games, but they're also two losable games. I kind of view those games as toss-up games to a certain extent at this point, although West Virginia's result over the weekend made me feel a lot better about that one. The big thing is neither one of those teams plays defense. And Virginia Tech's offense could obviously use some work. Now, those offenses are going to challenge the Virginia Tech defense a lot more than BC's and Old Dominion's did. But if Virginia Tech can get the next 10 days or so and clean up some of the offensive issues that they're having, which we'll get into later, then they've got a chance to win those two games. And I thought we had a good chance to start this season 3-1 or 4-0, but after we lost to ODU, it's like are we really?
Well, after the way it happened.
Yes, yeah.
After the way it happened. We don't need to rehash that. But,
Right.
But this was, I think, a little bit of a confidence booster, especially the way the defense played. I mean, I had so many people, I saw so many people talking about how, man, this looks like a vintage Bud Foster defense. Like they are going out there and they are manhandling, especially that front four.
They were attacking.
Manhandling that offensive line. Phil Jurkovec was in the dirt more times than he wasn't. And, you know, it started with Armani Chapman's interception on that second play of Boston College's first drive of the game. And Tech really just buckled down. Yes, Zay Flowers had a couple catches, but for the most part, BC couldn't do anything. I think they finished with 4 yards of rushing offense. They were in the negative for the majority of the game. So just overall, a really good performance. Yes, the offense could be better, but it's a confidence booster going forward.
I actually feel bad for BC. Like, they've got a good quarterback. They've got a good wide receiver. They've got a good tight end. They've got a good running back.
The offensive line
They've got a great secondary. Their run defense against anybody besides Virginia Tech could, use some work probably. But on the whole, they're a solid football team. But their offensive line is so bad that they're going to struggle to win any games this year. It's just really bad.
Well, let's start with the defense. I rewatched the condensed game yesterday because it's tough to get a great look. I was in the north end zone. You can't really tell exactly what's going on the field from there. But looking back, the word that came to mind was swarming. It felt like no matter where the ball went, there were 3 or 4 maroon jerseys around it. 155 total yards, 49 of which came on that one long play to Zay Flowers down the sideline. No first downs until their 8th drive of the game. That was in David's recap. 2 of 15 on third down. Defense did whatever they wanted on Saturday night.
Swarm is the right word. I think when I went back and looked at the stats when I got home after the game and looked at the box score, I think you saw Dax with 8 or 9 tackles, but nobody else had more than 5. And a whole bunch of guys had like 5 and 4. And it seemed like anything BC ran between the tackles, there was a whole lot of guys just gang tackling, which is awesome, which means there's a ton of guys getting off blocks, a ton of guys making the right reads, and everybody being aggressive and flowing to the football. Your solo tackles generally came outside the box when Jurkovec hit those check down routes to like backs and tight ends and receivers out on the flats. Made a lot of solo tackles out there, and they were great form tackles too. BC, their timing in the passing game isn't there. So when the receivers were catching the ball, they were catching the ball with their backs turned to the defenders, and as soon as they turned around, the defenders were right there making the tackle. Man, it was really a thing of beauty from a defensive standpoint.
Yeah, I think I calculated there were 10 to 15. I don't know if I put it in my recap or not, but there were 10 to 15 guys that had 2 or more tackles. And that just kind of goes to show that whether Tech was rotating in a Jaden McDonald or Jaden Keller or, Keyshawn Artis or, Dax Hollyfield got in there and got a big sack on Jurkovec and the guys up front, Cole Nelson, CJ McCray. It seemed like everybody was really making plays, whether it was Jalen Stroman or Nasir Peoples or Chamari Connor. I mean, I think all around, and Brent Pry was asked about tackling after the game and just said, man, it's kind of a lost art now. And he gave a lot of credit to Chris Marvin, that defense, and just how well they really just focus on that during the week and sit down and tackle. But Tech tackled really well. There were a lot of big hits in the flat that Tech just came up and hit the guy after a yard or 2 yard gain, which could have ended up being a big play, but weren't. I think in general, that front four, and Tech didn't always rush more than 4, but that front four, like Taiwan Garbett, man, he was outstanding. And I know,
and he's hurt too a little bit. Yeah, small injury.
Yeah, Pry said he's been battling a minor injury. Taiwan Garbett forced a fumble, had a sack. He almost had 2.
He should be credited with 2. He had the regular sack, right?
Yeah, but then there was the other one that Jurkovec slipped.
Yeah, but shouldn't like the closest guy to him get credit for that?
Yeah, they originally ruled it as a sack, and then they took it away after they discussed it.
So they just gave Jurkovec a rush for -3 yards, and nobody tackled him?
Yeah. I assume in the NFL that's a sack because you would have had to touch him down. But in college football, he was down after he slipped.
Normally, they give credit to the closest defender for things like that.
So that's what they did originally. I don't know. But it isn't. But
Well, he deserved about 4.
Yeah, but he had a couple tackles for loss. He only had 3 tackles total, but one was a sack and 2 tackles were for loss.
He forced that fumble inside the 5 that Tech almost recovered.
And he batted
down
a ball down.
Yeah, he was all over the place.
It got to the point. I was chatting with David Teal and Andy Bitter about the game after the game about this. There were so many times where he just ran up to the right tackle and literally just went like that.
Yeah.
And shoved the guy back like 4 yards.
Yeah.
Like just bodied him. And the fact that he's playing with a little bit of a minor injury, he was fun to watch.
Well, I'll read the quote for you for those of you who didn't follow David's social media or read the recap. Here's what Taiwan Garbett said about his performance. He said, "I felt like I played like a dog that ain't eat in 3 days. Go mess with a dog that didn't eat in 3 days. It might bite your hand." Feel like that's pretty. I feel like that's about right.
That's an accurate description, I would say.
Yeah.
Taiwan Garbett was all over the place. Also, you mentioned Cole Nelson, first career sack for Cole, and it felt like Tech really rattled Phil Jurkovec. Second year in a row, home opener where an NFL prospect quarterback has come in and just not looked like themselves with Sam Howell last year and now Phil Jurkovec.
He didn't play well, but most of that was due to pressure. Like, pressure throws your timing off on everything. Like, even when he had a clean pocket, it was like his eyes were just seeing somebody in the back of his head, and he was making bad deliveries that were were generally too early, and they'd be behind a guy. So just like bad protection throws timing off in all phases of the game, and I think they're going to be. I mean, they can't get any worse, I don't think, than that. I mean, that's actually like the worst Power 5 offensive line that I think I've ever seen.
And the fact that one of their probably best offensive linemen coming into the game didn't play because he was injured, and then they had
somebody got hurt. Klein, I think, got hurt during.
Yeah, there was a guy that got hurt during the game, and at a couple weeks before the season, like back in July, their one of their longtime veterans on the offensive line got hurt. So they've been battling some injuries. But yeah, and I think part of the difference is like North Carolina's offensive line was okay, but Tech, I think, just schemed really well.
They did
for that game. This scheme, what Brent Pry is doing with it, it's so similar to what Bud Foster did, where the guys just have to pin their ears back and attack. It doesn't require a whole lot of thinking, and as we've talked about before, sometimes that can just be too much. And I think you saw those guys literally just kind of enforce themselves and said, okay, we're going to push you back and push you back and push you back. And Taiwan Garbett said, oh, he noticed you. You could tell Phil Jurkovec was rattled. I don't know. He didn't look 100% towards the end of the game.
I sped watched the game a little bit yesterday morning. He came up hurting a couple times.
Yeah, especially after the one he slipped where Garbett came and and hit him afterwards.
Yeah.
He was walking off the field and didn't look 100%. But Tech got to him, and when you're playing a quarterback of that kind of talent, no matter whether his offensive line is good or not, that's what you have to do.
Yeah.
Well, and it started immediately. You talked about Armani Chapman. Second play of the game, gets an interception. When you've got that sellout crowd on an 8 o'clock start, if you're BC, the last thing you want to do is turn the ball over on the second play of the game.
That was a strange play. I should have written this in my column yesterday, but Chapman was playing outside leverage on the receiver, which means he was lined up on the receiver's outside shoulder, and he was up in press coverage too, up tight. And there's two types of routes you can run. You could run what I would call a hard-coded route, which is this is the play call, you're going to run this route no matter what. And then other certain types of plays, you have options on what routes you run.
Depending on how the defender's lined up.
So this play must have been hard-coded because this is the simplest thing in football. If that guy's lined up in press coverage on your outside, you run inside on a slant where there's nobody, right? He didn't do it. I mean, it's almost Tech aligned wanting him to run the slant, but he ran himself right into coverage.
Yeah, and Jurkovec still threw the ball there.
Threw it, which shows me that was a hard-coded call by BC. Probably a scripted call. A lot of
probably. I mean, second offensive play.
Yeah,
of the
a
drive.
lot of teams script their early plays just for reasons of seeing how the defense aligns and things like that. But it was just an odd play, and that's something I've seen more out of Tech this year. They're playing a little more outside leverage than they have in the past, which is I guess that'd be the one of the things that differs from the Pry scheme, the Foster scheme. The other thing that was different this week is we saw the nickel package a lot. So Keonta Jenkins and J.R. Walker only combined for 26 snaps at the Sam spot. Stroman was basically Tech's nickel in this game. They played an extra safety. That's why he played probably 40 or 50 snaps.
Yeah, because Tamari Connor scoots up to the nickel spot.
Right. And then you've got DJ Harvey had 6 snaps also. Now you're going to play the nickel more when it's 3rd and 12 every snap or every possession, like it was for Boston College this week, right? So here's the problem. Like J.R. Walker and Keonta Jenkins, I thought both played really good games, but by playing so well, they actually limited their own snaps, because BC was in 3rd and long so much. That's one way to think of it.
Put him into that down and distance.
Yeah.
Got to get him off the field. We got plenty more to talk about with the defense. Again, another phenomenal outing by Brent Pry's unit. But first, let's check in with Katie in the 4th chair for the first time.
I mean, the Scott Frost firing over the weekend truly puts things into perspective of how much money the Big Ten actually has. I mean, the concept of being able to save $7.5 million by waiting 19 days and not doing it. I mean, I get the writing was on the wall for, Scott Frost. They hated him after week 0, but I just can't even fathom Virginia Tech even being in a situation like that. And it just goes to show, I mean, that TV contract money is being put to good use for old ACC, man.
Like, what's an extra $7.5 million, right? If you're Nebraska, I guess. No, you never know. It could come out that him being a Nebraska alum, maybe they said, you know what, we're gonna fire you. If we don't fire you today, we're going to fire you on October 1st. So can we get it out of the way? Can you give us a break here? And he said yes. Maybe that'll come out, but I don't know. I know Tech owed Fuente $10 million when they fired him.
But they reached a settlement.
But they reached a settlement, and he said, that's fine. I'm out. Just give me 8.75. He actually knew he was getting fired a couple of weeks before he got fired. It was just the agent and Tech negotiating the buyout or whatever.
This is early.
This is
2
early.
This is after week 2.
You knew the writing was on the wall. You knew he was going to get fired. You just didn't know when it was going to get fired. But that's if they end up paying him all that money, that's insane. When they could have just waited a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, and it goes down. I can't fathom being in that position where you can just throw away $7.5 million. I mean, Tech has to count every penny, right? Not only that, they paid Georgia Southern, 1.4 in the buyout. So those 3 Sun Belt upsets cost a total of $4.7 million in buyout money. It's like
App State at Texas A&M,
was
Marshall at Notre Dame.
Yeah,
they were all around like $1 and $1.5 million. And they come out to $4 million total.
Right. At least when Virginia Tech lost to ODU,
it's like
just
a couple $100K.
Cost us a hotel room and a few iPads from the locker room. That's pretty much it.
And you knew going into the season that Scott Frost was on thin ice, but they looked good early against Northwestern in Dublin, and then the onside kick decision. I think that might have been the final nail for him.
I don't know if I've ever seen, like, what is that? Is that 10 in a row 1-score games that they've lost?
I think so.
I think they were 0-8 last year, and now they're 0-2 this year.
Lost an absurd number of 1-score games.
I'm always big into the law of averages, right? So like
it does not apply to Nebraska.
Apparently not. Yeah.
Well, people, Nebraska fans were saying last year they were 8 plays away from being 11-1 last year.
Right, and it doesn't matter. Like, they almost beat Ohio State last year.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. So it doesn't matter who they're playing. They're playing a top 5 team. They're going to lose by 1 score. They're playing Georgia Southern. They're going to lose by 1 score. They do the same thing every week. It's incredible.
And like Virginia Tech needs a football locker room renovation so badly, and $7.5 million does that and a couple other things. But I mean, Scott Frost has the best job in the world right now, a fired college football coach. Edo said it best. I'm sure everyone saw that video of him. They offered him his check, and he was like, "I'm good to go." So Scott Frost probably feels the same way. But I mean, I do appreciate when Virginia Tech wins, but it's like we have incentives going around like the Coach Pry bobblehead, donate $35 and you can get that. And like looking at that, that's what we have to do versus these Big Ten schools who just have unlimited funds apparently. So
now, you know,
things into perspective.
It still shows, I mean, money's important. All right, so it's like buying a lottery ticket or a raffle ticket. Let's say there's an organization sells 100 raffle tickets. You buy 10 of them and the next closest person buys 5. You have the best chance to win that raffle. Doesn't mean you're going to win it though. But you're giving yourself a higher percentage chance to win it. But that doesn't mean that you're going to win it. And like Texas A&M and Appalachian State this past week, right? Like how much money did Texas A&M probably spend on NIL stuff? I know what they've been accused of spending.
And how much money they, chose to buy Jimbo Fisher out of FSU. The
absolutely.
combination of that and all the NIL booster deals only to lose to Appalachian
It was
State,
something like 56 4- and 5-star recruits on the A&M roster and 1 or 2 on the App State roster. So, I mean, yes, you need to have the talent. It's more important than anything, but like it's very important that you develop players and develop the right mentality and things like that. And I still wonder about Texas football. I mean Texas in general, like at the high school level. Now, I think those guys get so much hype, but they all go play Big 12 football and they never really they get drafted and everything like that. But Texas A&M and Texas, they've underachieved with a bunch of Texas recruits through the years. Right, and
I don't know Texas. I mean, Quinn Ewers doesn't get hurt in Texas. Probably
they do
Texas
win that game.
Might win that game against Bama, but just in general, yeah.
Over the last 10 years,
I agree. And it's not like the other. It's not like the TCUs, the Texas Techs, the Baylors are doing fantastic either.
Well, it's not the case this year, but a couple of years ago, West Virginia had the best defense in that conference, and they were the only team in the conference that didn't recruit Texas high school players.
Yeah.
They did just give up 56 to Kansas.
Yes, 42 in regulation.
Yes, they had the rare loss by 13 in overtime
because they threw up.
They threw a
because
pick six.
Kansas scored
in
first.
Overtime. Now this shows you right here how important coaching is. So I don't know, we're getting off topic, and I'll shut up after this. But Lance Leopold, the former Kansas, the former Buffalo head coach,
now at Kansas.
Now at Kansas. So they're 2-0 for the first time in God knows when, and they actually have a quality win for the first time in forever on the road. So as soon as he gets to Kansas, Kansas gets better. As soon as he leaves Buffalo, Buffalo loses to Holy Cross on a Hail Mary to end
That was hilarious.
So that's the difference with a good coach. Yeah. All of a sudden, Buffalo's winning football games, and now without him, they're losing to Holy Cross.
Yeah.
Coach Brown's hot seat is looking mighty hot. So our matchup with West Virginia in a
Neil
couple
Brown,
weeks will be an interesting one to talk about.
Apparently his buyout's pretty high too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He just signed an extension or something recently.
I don't get this whole thing of signing coaches to extensions when you're a year away from probably firing them. And I get you're in a rock and a hard place. You don't want to kill your recruiting for a year because a coach doesn't have a certain number of years on his contract. But if you think you're going to have to fire him in a year or two, it's going to cost you more buyout money. So it's kind of a tough position to be in as an athletic director.
From one day ago, from 247 Sports, West Virginia coach owed $16 million if fired by Mountaineers after 2022 season.
People think Whit Babcock is bad at negotiating deals.
West Virginia now 0-2, losing to Pitt and Kansas, and 10 days away from making the trip to Lane Stadium on a Thursday night. That's going to be fun. It was a crazy weekend in college football, and thanks to Katie for bringing that up.
I opened up a can of worms.
Yes, we went off topic, but it's all good. I did want to mention we didn't talk about our friends up north in Charlottesville, and
we'll talk about it later.
We will.
Okay,
all right, we'll tease it. We'll come back with that later. But again, another crazy weekend in college football. We talked about all those upsets, but let's get back to Virginia Tech and Boston College. That's back-to-back weeks for this defense that they have been dominant. And again, Old Dominion, they threw up a couple prayers down the sidelines and were able to get that drive to win the game at the very end. But it just feels like Brent Pry has come in and immediately instilled the culture that he wants, especially on that side of the ball. And that's kind of what you want when you bring in a defensive-minded head coach, especially when he's calling plays to come in and immediately make that impact.
The number one thing we got asked in the offseason was, besides record, how do you judge progress in Brent Pry's first year? And I always answer the question with, I want to see player development, guys getting better over time and things like that. But now that I've seen Tech play for a couple of games, and this applies to the defensive side of the ball, I think what I wanted to see, and I didn't know it at the time, but I think I realize it now. I wanted to play a more physical brand of defense. I wanted to be more aggressive on that side of the ball, and I just wanted them to look like an old Virginia Tech defense as far as the enthusiasm, the physical play, the toughness, the edginess, things like that. And we've seen that through 2 games. Obviously, with the big caveat that ODU's offensive line or whole offense is mediocre at best, and BC's offensive line is quite possibly the worst in the country. Maybe UVA's rivaling them. We'll talk about that later. But as far as the mentality, like there's going to be greater challenges for the Tech defense, but you can't be anything but happy with number 1 in the country in third down defense and top 5 and total defense and rushing defense and all of that. And I do think it's the change back to the old style, one gap, attack-minded defense. That does help you play more physically because you're not sitting back and reading. You're trying to establish the initiative. You're defending by attacking, which I think is the proper style for Virginia Tech football. I think you can recruit to that system at Virginia Tech with 3-star recruits. You can, if you get guys that fit your system and buy into player development. And another thing I like, they're rotating their defense a lot. They played 24 guys at least one snap the other night. 21 of them played double-digit snaps. So they played a lot of players the other night, and that's keeping guys fresh to a certain extent, I think, and helping to build a little bit of depth too, and that'll pay dividends down the road.
I think one of the other biggest things too is look at the defense and look at how many guys have experience, or at least had experience coming into the season. You look at just the defensive line. You have that defensive tackle trio of Josh Fuga, Norrell Pollard, Mario Kendricks. You look at the ends. You have Jalen Griffin, Tywan Garbutt. That's not even including Eli Adams. At linebacker, Dax Hollyfield. And we haven't seen Alan Tisdale play, and hopefully on Tuesday we'll get an update on his eligibility issue, what Pry talked about last week. But still, Dax is a very experienced guy, and he's played very well so far this season too. At cornerback, Armani Chapman, Dorian Strong, Breon Murray, those guys all have a lot of snaps. And in the back end, at safety, Chamari Connor, Nasir Peoples. That's probably 16 of the 24 guys that have played a lot of those snaps. And so there are a ton of young guys that are getting snaps. But it helps you have experience. And when you are trying to build a culture, that is important.
The young guys, actually, they improved from game 1 to game 2 also. I'm just going only based on the eye test and the PFF grades. Like Jaden McDonald struggled a bit against Old Dominion. His head was kind of all over the place.
I'm sure first collegiate start, I'm sure it was crazy.
He was much better against Boston College in terms of discipline and being in the right spot. CJ McCray obviously was banged up going to the ODU game, but still played anyway. Didn't have a great game against ODU. Had a great game against BC. He was Tech's second highest grading player against BC. Cole Nelson, again, improved from game 1 to game 2. Obvious, again, caveat, BC's offensive line is horrible, but it's not like ODU's is great either.
But improvement is good to see.
Right, absolutely.
And for the defense, you mentioned, I believe, David, you tweeted this out, number 1 in third down defense.
It was Andy Bitter tweeted it out. And then Will, shout out Will Stewart, back there producing the podcast. Will tweeted out a couple stats yesterday about just the defensive ranks. And Tech's defense has been really good. And again, that's why I think, who knows how West Virginia's going to play. I don't know who do the Mountaineers have this week. Do you know?
Oh, a bad team.
Troy. And College Game Day is
no,
going.
That's wrong Mountaineers. Sorry, that's the better Mountaineers.
They play a really bad FCS team, just like Virginia Tech.
Yeah, all right. So and go figure, because you're not trying to schedule a good team before you play.
Yeah.
But they're going to be 1 and 2 coming into Blacksburg next Thursday. But I don't know how much that West Virginia team. Virginia Tech's defense plays, if that front continues to get better, and I think they'll probably overwhelm them. West Virginia's offense is pretty good. I think the defense is what struggles. But that North Carolina game, I think, is going to be the big first test for this defense, where North Carolina is like the 3rd or 4th highest grading offense in the ACC, and they've been good. It's the defense that has struggled.
Next to last.
so how, that Virginia Tech team first week of October in Chapel Hill, I think that's going to be the first time where you really see, all right, against a offense that has a lot of firepower, what does this team look like?
Strength on strength there for West Virginia and North Carolina against this Tech defense. Before we move on to the offense and take our break, no first downs until the 8th drive of the game. I mentioned that off the top. That it just felt like those guys came in ready to play, and with the crowd behind them too. I don't know if I've ever seen that before, not having a first down until deep into the second quarter.
It's certainly been a while. They're rare occurrences. And really, if you look at their drive chart, I think they had like a 70 or 80 yard scoring drive and then another like 60-yard drive. And that was it.
Yep.
That was it. I don't think they gained more than like 10 or 15 yards on any other drive. It was incredible.
I think the one note of, because I was going to say for Boston College had like 10 punts. The one note is Boston College had a 76-yard punt, Danny Longman, which tied the longest ever punt in Lane Stadium. The previous the other punt was I forget the guy's name, Alex Henry, I think.
Alex Henry.
Nebraska's punter in 2009 when they came to Blacksburg. So yeah, so Boston College did something good. They set a record for longest punt, 76 yards, but he was punting from his own end zone too.
That was impressive because you're like, oh man, Tech's going to get the ball maybe like at the BC 40 or 45 or
and
something
it rolled
like
to
that.
like the
and
it rolled to like the 25.
Yeah, totally flipped field position.
Yeah,
Not that it mattered.
But that was like the one. I mean, again, Boston College had that one scoring touchdown, but yeah, I think that defense, I mean, Jerkovic and Boston College were so rattled, and you could tell because it's like, all right, how many times are we going to go 3 and out? Like you go 3 and out for 7 possessions that you got up late in the second quarter, and then they finally got a first down, and it's like, all right, we held them this long, and I think at that point, Tech was up 17-0. I think at that point,
Yep.
so.
Eventually, like their traditional plays, they just scrapped them, and they went with their own version of smoke and mirrors. Yeah. That's when they started moving the ball a little bit. Is when they started trying. I wouldn't call them trick plays, but again, the old smoke and mirrors plays like Virginia Tech moved the football in 2019. That's the only thing that worked for them all night. Basically.
Yeah, and they couldn't run the ball either.
Yeah.
I mean, again, what was it, like 26, 29 rushes for 4
yards.
4 yards? I think I put in my article the lowest or fewest rushing yards Virginia Tech allowed since like Florida State in 2012.
Even if you take out the negative carries, they still only rush for like positive 61 yards.
Yeah,
right.
That again, if Virginia Tech can continue to be really good against the run, that's going to limit teams going forward.
And I believe you said in your recap as well that 4 may even be kind of generous because BC was down in the negatives for most of the game, and then they finally got a few at the very end there. Dominant performance from the defense. The offense, a lot cleaner, no turnovers for considering they had 5 against Old Dominion. We're going to talk about them as well, talk about Grant Wells. Did his job in a lot of spots, despite only having 140 yards. Keyshawn King with another big run. Gutsy call early to get in the end zone on the first drive of the game. All that's going to come up in the second half of episode 254 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. We're going to take a quick break and be right back after this. Welcome back to episode 254 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. We're recapping Virginia Tech's first win of the season, 27-10 over Boston College on Saturday in Lane Stadium. Hokies got back on track after a loss to ODU to open up the season. We've already talked about the defense. Do want to mention before we get into the offense, if you have a question or comment for David and Chris, Will behind the scenes today, make sure you leave that in the YouTube chat. We'll get to those with Katie at the end of the show. So again, we talked defense. Let's talk offense. That ODU game, 5 turnovers, over 100 yards in penalties. The very least, even though it may not have been very flashy on Saturday night, they got the job done and looked a lot cleaner overall.
Yeah, the passing game was more efficient. They didn't throw for as many yards, only 140 yards, but no interceptions, of course. Yeah. Completion percentage jumped up from about 56 to 64 or 65. So just a more efficient, better job overall. I still can't totally judge the passing game because Jaden Blue was going to be one of your top receivers, and he played 10 plays because he's been hurt. And he's not in football shape.
Caleb Smith played, 26?
23, I believe it was. And he made them count. He made them count for sure. But then you're supposed to use Keyshawn King as this jack of all trades type player. You can't because your running backs are hurt, so you have to use him at running back. And then he got hurt anyway. So there's so many missing pieces in the passing game, and everybody's new. The quarterback's new, the coaches are new, a lot of the wide receivers are new, the system is new to everybody. I thought they improved in game 2, considering BC, all right, it's a step up in competition.
Yep.
BC's secondary is really good. Those two corners, again, over 3,000 snaps in their careers between them. Their safety's very experienced. Overall, I think they were 3rd or 4th in the country in pass defense last year. They can really defend the pass. So considering the level of competition and the fact that Tech's efficiency got better, they improved. Still a long way to go. The timing's off in some instances. The first drive of the game when they tried that screen to Gosnell right on the goal line, it was well screened by the slot receiver, but Gosnell didn't get around the screen quick enough. It was just off. Like it was put in the spot where he was supposed to be instead of where he was, which is what you're supposed to do as a quarterback, and he just didn't get there. So it wasn't a bad call or a bad play because it was open. It was there. You know, it just didn't get executed. Yeah. So there's plenty of timing issues like that. I have some numbers here as far as the running game goes. These are pure run blocking grades for some of Virginia Tech's key blockers from last year to this year. Last year, Nick Gallo's run blocking grade, 57.8. This year, 36.7, down over 20 points. Drake Dulius last year, 69.1. This year, 38.9, down 30 points. Silas Janzi, 67.8 last year, 51.1 this year. Parker Clements, 75 last year, 54.5 this year. Caden Moore, 71.3 last year, 55.1 this year. Johnny Jordan, 66.6 last year, 56.1 this year. That's a half a dozen good, proven football players for Virginia Tech that are performing at a much lower level in run blocking this year, which I guess in some ways you can say is concerning, but is also encouraging because you know those guys are capable of playing better than they are. It's not like we've got a bunch of new guys as far as run blocking goes, and you don't, and you're sitting there wondering, oh, are these guys physically capable? We know these guys are physically capable because they've done it in the past. So to me, I think the issue is just they're slow picking up what they're being asked to do in this offense. Because we know Joe Rudolph has a history of putting good offensive lines on the field, so that's not a coaching issue. Tyler Bowen's been an NFL tight ends coach, so I don't think that's a coaching issue per se. I just think they're struggling to adapt, and they're just not getting out there, and they're not quite sure what they're supposed to do, which makes you hesitate as a blocker, and hesitation leads to penetration and things like that. I think they got a good opportunity this week by playing Wofford, and Wofford has not scored a point this year, in case anybody hasn't been following Terrier football. The Mike Young Bowl is not going to be very exciting. Virginia Tech doesn't have to worry about scheming to beat Wofford. All right, Virginia Tech's going to beat Wofford. The defense will probably outscore Wofford. All Virginia Tech offensively has to do is worry about getting better. Like, turn on the film, figure out exactly what you've been struggling with, and go out and practice it against Wofford. Get your timing down as good as you can going into the West Virginia and North Carolina games when you've got a chance to put up some points. The whole Wofford game, it doesn't matter whether Virginia Tech wins 31-0 or 62-0. It's about finding what you need to get better on offense and getting out there in a game situation and improving upon those things. I think Tech has the physical ability to play a lot better than they have on offense. I think in the passing game, they need to get healthier, and they need to continue to adjust to the system. And the running game is just all about adjusting the system and, of course, getting the running backs healthy. Obviously, Keshawn King makes a big difference in the running game. And Tech could have put up more yards the other night if he hadn't gotten hurt. 5 touches, I don't think I've ever seen such an impact on 5 touches before. And it wasn't just his long run. He caused Virginia Tech's first touchdown. It was, 3rd and 5, and they threw it to him in the flat, and he was going to get tackled for loss or no gain.
And he escaped two defenders, right, and ended up getting a first down.
BC's a good tackling team. That was the toughest play he's made in his career, and he's averaging like 8 broken tackles or 8 forced missed tackles per game for Virginia Tech right now, considering he's only played a game and a half basically. I believe he's forced 13 missed tackles this year through a game and a half. In his previous 22 games, he forced 26 missed tackles.
So he's halfway there.
Yeah.
In 2 years.
Yeah, exactly. He's just a much improved player, much more physical player.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the biggest things, like Chris said, with so many injuries, it's hard to kind of judge where this offense is at. Where Caleb Smith only plays 20-something snaps, and he had that big, long pass he got from Grant Wells that set up Virginia Tech's eventual scoring touchdown. But he pulled up a little bit after that, went over to the sideline, rode the stationary bike for the next couple plays, and then literally before the play that Tech scored on, which was a little out route to Smith in the corner of the end zone that Wells threw to him and Tech scored, he was on the bike, came back out, scored the touchdown. He who's scoring a touchdown is not 100% healthy. Jaden Blue's not healthy. Stephen Gosnell battled an injury. Malachi Thomas, Jalen Holston aren't healthy. There are so many guys part of this offense that aren't healthy. This is a chance this week to, one, get young guys behind the scenes more reps, but also get guys healthy. You don't need to play Malachi Thomas this week. There's no need to risk him. Now, if you, I mean, again, like there's no reason to put him out there for 4 plays for him just to get hurt.
Right,
so,
right. Especially your experienced guys like Caleb Smith, right? Yeah. Caleb Smith knows what to do.
If Caleb Smith is only available to play 20 snaps, it'd be nice to get a lead, but there's no reason to press the issue. But I think going back to the Boston College game and in your original question, I think Tech did a lot of good things, but they weren't flashy. Like kind of like watching Tom Brady a little bit when he's just throwing a little short passes. They're picking up first downs, picking up yards, and it wasn't always converting. But Tech, especially late in the second half, Tech scored when it needed to, and I think Tech's showing improvement, which, as we talked about, is really the biggest thing.
Game management, I thought, was impressive. We knew Pry could coach defense. We knew he knew the state of Virginia in recruiting. We knew he understood the culture at Virginia Tech and all that stuff. But as a guy who'd never been a head coach before, we had no idea whether he could manage a game. And even after the ODU at the end with the clock issue, you questioned it. But I thought, and I don't know for a fact that this was his thought process, but Virginia Tech wasn't very aggressive in the passing game, especially once they got up by 14 to 17 points. They just were content to run the ball and throw it short because, honestly, BC's offense is so inept. The only way they were going to beat Tech is if Tech threw them the ball. So I think Tech played it safe, which I know that's a boring style of football, but it's a smart style of football at the same time.
And when Keyshawn King's healthy, we saw Keyshawn King rip off a 65-yard run when the offense blocked really well. Right. When you can run the ball like that,
I think, and what we saw when BC cut it to 7, boom, they threw all that out the window and said, we need to score right now. So they threw deep to Caleb Smith and they scored. And that was a concerted effort to throw to Smith. I mean, when you throw a passing play, generally speaking, you've got anywhere from 2 to 4 options on the play as a quarterback. That was to Smith the whole way on that. If you go back and watch that play, Wells takes a snap. He's looking at Smith the whole time. There's no other options. Everybody else is a dummy route. They're throwing that ball to Smith.
It was a perfectly placed ball and perfect. A really good catch.
You can see why Glenn said before the season that Wells has the best deep ball accuracy that he's ever coached. I mean, you can clearly see that. And then, they got aggressive on that drive, scored, got up by 2 scores again, and then went back to the previous game plan of, okay, come on back, try to score again, BC. You can't do it, right? So if that was the thought process, which would make sense if it was, I thought it was sound game management.
Well, let's talk about the running backs a little bit more. You mentioned all 3 of them banged up, Malachi Thomas, Jalen Holston, and now Keyshawn King. Doesn't seem like the latter 2 are all that serious. They should be able to play through it. But Keyshawn King showed he's a weapon again. And then last Thursday on Tech Talk Live, Brent Pry said that Malachi Thomas was a game-time decision for Saturday's game. He said, I believe his words were, I've never seen anyone heal as quick as Malachi has. That room should continue to improve. And like you said, if the run blocking can get better, the running game should become a huge plus for this team moving forward.
I would love for Obviously, I would love for Malachi Thomas to not play this weekend, and I would love for him to make his triumphant return for West Virginia, which is what I've been targeting in my head the whole time. I think it'd be great if the run blocking came together in the exact week that Malachi Thomas made his return. And that, I just think that makes this offense so much better.
And having him, and then you can kind of use Keyshawn King as a jack of all trades guy. And Brent Pry, for those wondering about Keyshawn King's status, Brent Pry did say after the game that Keyshawn King, it was just a minor thing and he should be fine to go this Saturday against Wofford. And as Keyshawn King tweeted, he's like, I'll be back. So don't worry about
The
it.
thing is, man, I know the original plan was to use him in that Swiss Army knife
But
role.
he's really good in the backfield.
He's clearly one of Tech's two best backs.
Yeah.
Like when 100% Malachi Thomas, 100% Keyshawn King, and then everybody else.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, it's not even close. So you want to run those two guys as running backs as much as possible, I think. So it kind of takes King out of that role,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah, well, I think, and honestly, it kind of probably depends on the health of the wide receivers and how that's going. But again, this is a week where you try to get everybody healthy, and you don't. If somebody's not 100%, no point in playing them. Just let them heal, let them rest.
I think King is fine. Like,
But
he was
more
on
worried
the
about
sideline smiling.
Yeah, no, I'd be more
he was
worried about a
fine.
guy like Caleb Smith. You know, if Caleb Smith or Jaden Blue still has a nagging thing, don't play him.
And that's another thing. I don't think Tech felt threatened with Boston College. I think they could have brought King back into the game.
Yeah.
He never changed out of his uniform. He jogged to the tent. He was on the exercise bike smiling. He was standing on the sideline smiling. He could have gone back into that football game. And I bet if they didn't score after BC cut it to 7, I bet they wouldn't. My guess, just a guess, that they would have brought him back in.
In like an emergency situation.
So, so I'm happy with injury management with Virginia Tech right now.
Don't. you better not.
Let's knock on wood here.
Knock on wood right now.
We're going to have Malachi Thomas take the opening kickoff against Wofford on Saturday.
God, you'll have to drag me out of this.
You guys see Khalil Herbert scored a touchdown for the Bears
I
yesterday?
did.
Yes.
Man, just a perfect example of that guy's vision.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't a poorly blocked play, but it wasn't a great block play either.
He was supposed to run up the middle and then cut outside.
So many backs would just run right into that. His timing and vision of the cut was just absolutely perfect. That guy, I'm sad I never got to see him play a football game in person.
Well, and the conditions in Chicago yesterday were less than ideal, to say the least.
Well, he was their best back yesterday by far from a production standpoint, too.
Yeah, definitely. Before we keep going with the offense, let's check in with Katie in the fourth chair once again.
So what exactly is our desired outcome for the UVA ODU game this weekend? I, for one, am not looking forward to it. UVA gets them at home. Go figure. Both these teams are coming off of losses, though. UVA's offense was non-existent this weekend against Illinois, even though they have this generational quarterback and the best receiving core in the ACC. And then you look at ODU, who got manhandled by ECU this weekend. Classic. So,
Naturally.
I mean, where do we stand with this game as a Virginia Tech fan? What do you want to see?
I think you got to root for the ACC. We need the ACC to be as good as possible. And like losing to ODU again, like if ODU is 2-1 with 2 wins over ACC teams and a loss to East Carolina, that just really reflects poorly on the conference.
Does ODU play?
Now that being said, I will laugh if ODU beats them because I'm sure a bunch of their fans were talking trash. Big time trash about Virginia Tech when we lost that game. And of course, my response to that would be, well, ODU's beaten Virginia Tech twice in the last 5 years. You can't beat us more than once in 2 decades.
Yeah.
So you really have no reason to talk too
Does
much
ODU
trash
play
now.
JMU this year?
They do.
JMU's going to kill him.
Yeah, that's the thing. JMU's 2-0 and JMU's rolling.
Didn't they win by like
in
50?
the Fun Belt?
Didn't they beat
think
Middle
they scored
Tennessee by like 50 in their first game?
Something like
I think
that.
they played in Norfolk State this weekend,
Oh, yeah,
and I think they scored 70, I want to say.
That's terrifying.
I don't know. I'm not going to turn the game on, and I'm not going to keep up with it. I'm going to check the score on Sunday and go, okay, and digest it because that's going to be a mess of a game.
I don't think ODU's defense can put up much of a fight. Their defense isn't that good. We made it. Obviously, Tech made them look a lot better than they are. So I think UVA is going to win. I'd be surprised if UVA didn't win, but I would roll my eyes from an ACC standpoint if they lost, but I would also laugh.
It wouldn't be the most. It wouldn't be the most. It'd be the most ACC thing.
Yeah, that's true. Now, their offensive line is probably a slight step ahead of Boston College's, but not by much. I think they average 1.4 yards per carry against Illinois. They can't protect the quarterback. They didn't protect the quarterback well against Richmond. But everybody's, Tony Elliott's first win, blah, blah, blah. Let's ignore the glaring issues with the offensive line, right? Well, guess what? They're not good. And, we know Brendan Armstrong can play. We know they got like 3 wide receivers that I'd love to have. They're really good players. But if you can't block anybody, then none of that stuff matters, man.
It did seem like heading into the season, Virginia's MO was going to be, we're going to score 50, see if you can outscore us. And that doesn't work when you only score 3.
No, it doesn't. Well, the thing is, the crazy thing is, I think their defense is improved. Apparently, it seems like it's improved.
But it's kind of like Boston College. They can't.
They're very similar to Boston College. Yeah. It seems like, except they've got a couple more wide receivers.
I think they've got more offensive talent at the skill positions, but about the same offensive line. Yeah, I mean, and again, not to get ahead of ourselves, but if Virginia's offensive line is in this state and Virginia Tech's defensive line is in this state come November,
that's gonna be fun. Yeah. I know what's funny is who was their player that transferred to UNC? Noah Taylor.
Yeah.
Their defensive player. Okay, so he was one of their best defensive players, right? So he's left and their defense has gotten better, and he's arrived at UNC and their defense has actually gotten worse. Yeah. It's just they're not gonna. So UNC, technically speaking, has improved their talent level by bringing him in, and they've gotten worse still. It's no matter what they do down there, they're playing bad defense.
Speaking of UNC, I want to take back a comment I made on this podcast a couple weeks ago. I was like, but they brought in Gene Chizik. He's won a national championship before. I think that they'll get things together. I regret saying that.
They didn't even cover against Georgia State.
We know Gene Chizik can coach defense. That's the thing. It's all about the culture at UNC. When your head coach is dancing in the locker room after you give up 61 points to App State, that means they have very low expectations and standards for their players. Yeah. You should never celebrate that if you're a coach. The guy's just so out of touch. He doesn't even fly with the team to road games. He has his own private plane. It's just, I sound like I hate it for him, but I don't. I actually think it's kind of funny. But.
So the UVA-ODU game will be an interesting one to watch. Someone said on Twitter if ODU wins that they should get the Commonwealth Cup, which is just laughable. I can't even imagine that even happening. But last thing, another matchup to watch this weekend is Wake Forest plays Liberty. It's at Wake Forest, go figure. But we'll get a little glimpse into see how Liberty plays against an ACC team that's obviously an opponent that we have in the coming weeks.
They lost their quarterback. Brewer, of course, got hurt in their first game.
Yes.
Do
you know? How much did Sam Hartman play?
He played the whole game. It was awesome.
Did?
Yeah, he played great.
Played. I think 4 passing touchdowns, a rushing touchdown.
It'll probably be a blowout, but
Wake has the #1 rated defense from a PFF standpoint in the ACC through 2 games.
Wow.
Yeah. After they fired their defensive coordinator, and looks like, now granted they have not faced teams that put up much of a resistance in VMI and Vanderbilt.
But having Sam Hartman back now, that combination.
They'll be a tough out.
We'll get to see some of these teams this weekend and already getting fired up for some of these rivalry matchups. North Carolina in October and then Virginia coming up Thanksgiving week. We'll see. Maybe we get to see Brendan Armstrong put up 3 points again or throw screens to their left tackle, whatever we want. Let's get back to the offense here. We talked a lot about the running backs. We dipped our toe into Grant Wells' performance. Again, you look at the numbers and 16 for 25, 140 yards. It doesn't look flashy, but when you're coming off a game where you throw the 4 interceptions, it felt good to see him just kind of, like you said, fill that game manager role, do his job. He got a few big throws late in the game and helped the Hokies cement that win.
It seemed like when they made a concerted effort to do something in the passing game, they were able to do it. They made a concerted effort to throw deep to Caleb Smith, and they completed it. And then later in the game, when they needed to pick up some first downs on some longer yardage situations, they made a concerted effort to get Connor Blumrick the football, and they were able to do it. You got to get Dawan Lofton going. This is 2 coaching staffs and 2 different groups of players in a row that have raved about how good he is, and here he is with 5 catches for 40-some yards through 2 games. I mean, he had 2 catches for -2 yards the other night. And he's a better player than that. I mean, Justin Fuente came on this podcast, sat in that chair right there, and called him a stud. And then all in the preseason, I asked every player that I interviewed, who's about to have a breakout year, and they're all basically like, oh, Dajuan Lofton's awesome. He's great. Here he is through 2 games. He got 5 catches, and I'm not blaming him because I think the whole passing game, for reasons we've enumerated, is struggling right now. But you've got to find a way to get him the ball in space, get him in a situation where he can make some guys miss and hopefully make some generate some bigger plays. I don't think things are as far away as they seem on offense. I know Tech fans are used to going whole seasons with hearing Frank Beamer back in the day say, "Oh, just went back and watched the film and we're 1 block away." Right? That's what he'd say all the week on Tech Talk Live. And I don't want to sound like that because it is more complicated than that. There are a lot of these plays where Tech, in my opinion, is about 4 blocks away. but I also know that the guys making those 4 blocks have played much better football in the past, and they're capable of playing better football in the future. I think that will happen in the running game. I don't know how quickly the passing game will come along. It's just impossible to guess at this point.
Yeah, but I feel like the good news is Grant Wells didn't force anything. It wasn't like he's trying to be a superstar and fit it into tight windows. He was very methodical, I thought. Did you feel like he went through his progressions well?
Yeah, I think he did all right there, and I thought he ran it well.
Yes,
broke some tackles. Oh my God,
he's deceptively
he
athletic.
terrified me on that one play when it was a
God,
long yardage situation. He
when
scrambled for about 10 or 12 yards. No, he just put his head down. Oh, he about knocked out the BC player too.
Yeah,
I mean, he showed his toughness, but please never do that again.
Thinks he's Logan Thomas, I guess. Yeah, no, I think in general he's a deceptively athletic guy, and he's a good pocket presence, I felt. And he didn't try to do too much. And in this type of game, as Chris already talked about, if you make a mistake, you are handing Boston College, not points, but you're giving them an opportunity. And he limited that, didn't let that happen. And instead, when Virginia Tech needed to do something, when Virginia Tech needed to score, he connected with Caleb Smith. Yes, the offense wasn't flashy, and it was a little sluggish at times, but I think that's all you need in this kind of game where your defense is so dominant.
I think, and I know some fans won't want to hear this because the complaint the last few years is Tech ran the quarterback too much. But you need to incorporate the read option back into it a little bit, I think. I think that's making it easy for the defense to just tee off on the running back. I mean, I think he pulled it down like once in the read option once and ran 16 yards for a touchdown.
Yeah.
But I can't think of too many like actual read option calls in there. He's just handing it off to the running back every time. So you got to figure something like that. I'm not saying you need to come out and do this against Wofford.
Yeah,
but I think you've got to make the defense think a little bit more in the running game.
And I also think it's interesting because Chance Black played a lot because King
was out.
King missed a bunch of time. Holston didn't play. Thomas is out. So Chance Black got a lot of snaps. And I think maybe if Keyshawn King's in the backfield or Malachi Thomas, those are guys when they come back. Obviously, I don't think you really need to start incorporating that. I guess unless you want to test it, incorporate it against Wofford because you don't need to be that advanced offensively against Wofford, but against West Virginia, if you've got those better running back options back,
you throw the book at West Virginia. You don't hold anything back at that point.
Exactly.
You mentioned Connor Blumrick as well, who we kind of said on last week's podcast, it didn't feel like he was all that involved until those Hail Marys at the very end against Old Dominion. Right. He had 5 catches, and I want to say he converted a big 3rd and 11 later on in the game.
He made 2 guys miss on one play too.
Yep.
Which you need. I mean, you can't just have this passing game where, you throw it to him and he gets tackled. Hey, nice catch. You've got to have some guys that make dudes miss.
He lined up in the Wildcat a couple times too.
I mean, you look at how, I mean, this applies for every position, but you look at how Alabama won that football game at the end. I mean, their quarterback just got out and made somebody miss, right? And then they kicked the field goal. It wasn't some brilliant play call by Nick Saban or envious coaches where they just outcoached Texas. No, they had an athlete make a play in the open field and they won the game. And you've got to have that. And that's why Keyshawn King has been so big for Virginia Tech this year. He's forcing missed tackles.
Yeah, I think Blumrich's athleticism is something Brent Pry raved about, and Tyler Bowen. They were like, this guy is so athletic. He's such a big mismatch, and we didn't see it against Old Dominion. And there were a couple times where he lined up in the slot, and they threw him the ball on a slant, crossing, whatever it was. They got him the ball, and he took a couple snaps in the Wildcat, which I think kind of mixes things up, gives the defense something else they have to prepare for. But I think in general, he's a guy, they need to get him the ball, because like Chris said, kind of like Keyshawn King, when the ball's in his hands, he can do some special things with it.
Connor Blumrich, the weapon, as we're going to call him, can really do anything: throw, pass, run, or throw, catch, run. And he had a much better game.
And mustaches like that either.
Yes. Great defense from the Hokies, clean offense, got a 27-10 win. I do want to talk about, before we wrap up here, how good the atmosphere was, and the video that was circulating yesterday of Brent Pry running out of the tunnel and hands over his head, just so excited to be running out of the tunnel for the first time. I thought that was really cool and kind of a breath of fresh air there, seeing Brent Pry just so excited to be in that atmosphere.
The atmosphere was really good all day, in the stadium, out of the stadium, whatever. Like, even in the tailgating lots, people talked about the ODU game, but it was more of like, you chuckle about it and then you're like, yeah, whatever, let's move on. Now, obviously, if you'd lost to Boston College, it would have been more frustrating, but it kind of almost seems like the ODU game didn't even happen now, to a certain extent.
I think everybody was so excited for Pry's first game,
right?
First home football game of the season, and so many people are in town, so many former students, so, just alums, big fans, people bringing their families to games for the first time, and people get to see Brent Pry for the first time, and Brent Pry runs out of the tunnel. And Brent Pry's excitement level, I think, was off the charts. And again, they kept it a clean game, which I think was really important. But you talk about the stands and the atmosphere. It was a sellout, and I think for the most part, the stands were completely full, and the fans had a lot to cheer about, I think, which was good.
And the Tech and the ACC Network both, I think, did a good job with their presentation of the entire environment and atmosphere and everything too.
And I think that win and that experience, especially with Wofford coming up this weekend, probably not going to be anything that's going to deter fans from coming back out. West Virginia, that Thursday night game might have just gotten taken to another level, because now a lot of those fans just had a great experience in a night game at Lane Stadium. Now they're coming back and going to make some noise.
Especially when you can, as I know Chris is excited about, especially when you have the opportunity to rub it in West Virginia's face.
Absolutely. Rub it in their face. Don't just beat them. You run up the score, man. You don't hold anything back on this if you get that opportunity.
Yeah. It's a 7:30 p.m. Eastern kick on ESPN under the lights, and it's going to be
it's an opportunity that you don't get much these days as a Tech fan.
No,
two night games in a row, one of them against a team you haven't played at home since 2004, a border rivalry.
Yeah, and it'll be it's like the 20-something anniversary of it's like 20-something years to the day of Virginia Tech's first ever Thursday night game,
right,
against West Virginia.
Yeah, the whole Thursday night thing started in that 1994 game.
1994, so
against West Virginia.
I'm not a math major,
so that's when the Thursday night tradition started.
Yes.
Thursday night football was new to ESPN back then.
Yeah. And so now Virginia Tech has a chance. You're back on the Thursday night stage, and you have a chance to make a statement against your rival. I mean, that's going to be a game. Did you ever find your shirt? Do you look for it yet?
I don't see it in either one of my closets. I am extremely afraid that when I was remodeling my house, putting in new floors and painting, I had to pack up everything, that it accidentally got thrown out. I really hope not.
I hope not.
Right, but I'll do some more digging this weekend and see if I can find it.
Well, Wofford coming up on Saturday, West Virginia 10 days away. Last thing before we go to the YouTube chat, Brent Pry did mention how big of a recruiting weekend this was. He said on Tech Talk Live, they've got ton of guys coming in. Some guys might have to sit on laps during the game, but it's okay. They're going to be in the stadium. It felt like great experience for all of the visitors, and hopefully maybe a boost for the Hokies moving forward.
Yeah, the sidelines were packed. I think there were anywhere between 100 and 120 football recruits in town, not to mention a couple basketball guys in town too, taking official
all
visits.
sports.
Yeah,
It was all sports.
every single sport had a football weekend.
So I was
or had a
out
good
Friday.
recruiting
I was
weekend.
out Friday night, and somebody with softball told me I've got to get up early. Big day, hosting recruits all day. You know, so it's all sports.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think in general.
and it was they saw a great atmosphere.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Like, if
you
you don't-
just
if you-
talked about the atmosphere.
Yeah. If you
That's
don't-
the atmosphere you want to see.
If you don't come to Virginia Tech, it's not going to be because the atmosphere is not great, right?
Yeah.
And they get to see a win, which people stay in the stands a little bit longer. It lasts a little bit longer into the game. So definitely good for recruiting. Maybe we'll see the fruits of that come in all sports moving forward over the next couple of weeks. Let's check in on the YouTube chat. Any good questions or do we have any stats in there? We've got our
Yeah.
graphic over there.
A lot of good questions today, but first, you love it, Scott. What am I saying? Stat time with Scott Lester. So he says Beamer's first game versus Boston College allowed 617 total yards, 169 were rush, 448 were passing yards. Fuente's first game versus Boston College allowed 124 total yards, 44 rush, 80 pass. And then Pry's first game versus Boston College, 155 total yards, 4 rush, 151 pass. I mean, that cannot be underestimated. The fact that they only rushed for 4 yards is incredible. But 2009, this is a separate stat. 2009 BC game, BC had 0 first downs in the entire first half. Only time since 87 opponent had 0 first downs in the first half. But aside from the fact, question-wise, Eric Fisher says, does Chris still stand by his statement that this is the best secondary the Hokies will face all season?
I haven't studied any future opponents.
Yeah.
So I don't know. But I do know from a statistical standpoint, from an experience standpoint, from a PFF grading standpoint, Boston College's secondary was excellent. So when you combine that, just the pure experience and the historical performance of those players that they have, I don't think there's going to be too many teams that are going to be able to match that, that would have a chance to match that. So from that standpoint, it's all downhill from here. Certainly, like West Virginia and Carolina don't play as well in the secondary. I'd have to study. I haven't looked at NC State or Miami or teams like that, and certainly those teams have talent in the secondary, or they wouldn't be ranked where they're ranked. But the BC's darn good back there. It was certainly a big step up in competition from week one. I would go so far as to say that at worst they'll be one of the top 3 or 4 secondaries Virginia Tech faces this year, but this certainly could be the best.
Frank Ketterly, let's talk running backs. With the offensive line still needing work, what will Malachi Thomas add to this offense when he's back? How will the offense look different? Keyshawn King looks really good.
Yeah, he does. And, while you'd love to be able to use King in more of a jack-of-all-trades role when Malachi Thomas comes back, it's really difficult. It'd be really difficult to take him out of a ball-carrying position right now, just based on what he's done. You could do that some. Certainly right now you can't really do it any. But I just think, assuming, Malachi Thomas comes back, and when he comes back, he's in football shape and he can be productive. Now, if he doesn't look like the Malachi Thomas we saw last year when he got rolling, then that's a different story. But if he comes back and he's a good player, then those are your 2 backs, I think. I think you have to go with those 2 guys. And Jalen Holston's such a good teammate, but the bottom line is for his career, he averages fewer than 4 yards a carry. And that's not productive enough. You got to win football games, right? And when Virginia Tech decided to switch to a 2-man running back rotation last year, they picked the right 2 guys. They picked Raheem Blackshear.
There were just a couple games there
where they didn't get the ball enough.
Carries.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But they picked the right 2 guys, and I wonder if the same thing won't happen this year. And I know it upset Holston last year when he got his carries taken away, and he feels better about his chances this year. I know Pry's hyped him up, but I just think when it comes down to it, if you get a healthy Keyshawn King and a healthy Malachi Thomas at the same time, and these numbers get better right here, the run blocking numbers, then I just think I think those 2 guys are your 2 best options right there, and it's not very close.
I just think it'd be hard to take both of those guys off the field.
Yeah.
You don't want to. Keyshawn King What did Keyshawn? How many rushing yards did Keyshawn King finish with?
64.
64.
64,
Right.
because he had
That one long
Or
run.
63. I think it was a 64-yard run, right?
Yeah, I mean, and he had over 100 yards last week, and he would have had over 100 yards, I would think, if he had played in the second half, but he didn't. And, Malachi Thomas he hadn't played yet this year, but he had some really good games last year. And again, we kind of talked about this past 2 weeks, but I'm very curious to see how the staff manages the running back rotation, because it was so poorly managed in the past. When a guy is hot, do you continue to feed him? Well, if Jalen Holston, is behind those two guys that are hot and that continue to produce, I don't think there's any reason why you say, okay, we're going to give Jalen Holston more time. Even though, yes, he's been consistent, he's been a good team player. Keyshawn King, we've seen how explosive he can be. And if Malachi Thomas can turn it on when he gets back, that is a really dynamic running back duo if they can stay healthy.
Yeah, that's two quality guys back there. And, King was a four-star recruit by some services coming out of high school, and his film was awesome. And I always loved him as a prospect. So it's good to see him finally playing like I thought he was capable of playing.
Hoping we see both those guys out there for West Virginia, but Wofford coming up on Saturday first. Probably hoping at most we see Keyshawn King there again. Malachi Thomas, rest up, get ready for the big games coming up, that stretch of 5 games. Thank you, Katie, for going through the YouTube chat, and thank you to everybody in the chat for giving us your questions and comments. Before we get out of here, guys, what is coming up on techsideline.com over the next few days?
Oh, it should be a traditional week of in-season content. I assume, will have a Monday Thoughts. Brandon Patterson will have his video recap. I'll have a preview of Wofford, although there's honestly not a whole lot to preview. So this is not going to be one of my typical, whole chapters of a book, basically. It's going to be maybe, instead of a 3,500 word preview, it's probably like a 1,500 word preview or something like that, because there's just not much to say. But that saves time. I think I'm going to tell Brandon Patterson not to preview Wofford, because there's no point. There's not really much film on him anyway. Just dedicate all your resources to the big one next week against West Virginia, which is what the football program should do too.
Yeah, let's see what's coming on Tech Sideline tomorrow, Tuesday at 12:30. Brent Pry will speak to the media, so I'll have a story tomorrow off of what he says there. Wednesday, we'll talk with some select student athletes at 2, and then we'll get to go observe practice at 4 or 5, and talk to Brent Pry and some student athletes afterwards. And then Thursday we'll talk to an assistant coach, I think. So there should be some pretty interesting stuff over the next couple of days. Although, you are preparing, Virginia Tech is preparing for Wofford, but this week is more about them figuring some things out. I think I'm going to ask Brent Pry about the run game specifically and how he thinks the guys up front are doing tomorrow. Because I think that's one of the biggest keys to this offense. If Tech can get the running backs healthy and get those guys going, get the big guys up front pushing and back to how they graded out the past couple of years, I think that'll be a positive.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll also be back on Wednesday afternoon, TSL Podcast, previewing the Wofford game. We'll go through all of that and kind of the stuff we've kind of touched on here today about using the Wofford game to make sure you're ready for that next stretch coming up into October.
Maybe we can talk half the show about Wofford and maybe the other half about some other stuff. There's really not a whole lot you can say about Wofford.
Well, we'll figure out something to talk about for sure. And we'll be back Wednesday afternoon with that. But I think that wraps things up here on episode 254 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. I want to thank everybody on set. David Cunningham across the way, managing editor of Tech Sideline at The Real D. Cunna. Chris Coleman to my right, lead analyst and columnist for Tech Sideline at Chris Coleman TSL on Twitter. Katie Adams in the fourth chair. Katie 6 Adams on Twitter did a great job once again. Behind the scenes, founder and general manager Will Stewart filling in as producer, did a great job as well at Will Stewart TSL on Twitter. And I'm Jake Lyman signing off. Enjoy the start to your week, Hokies fans. We'll talk to you on Wednesday.